like your outfit too. This is terrific.
Well, being a cowboy, it's what we got to do, you know.
Yep.
Well, Mr. Moody, welcome to the Edge broadcast here. We're going to be talking about life after life. And tell us a little bit how you got even to look into life after life.
Well, I got to say, right now I'm 77, but when I was 18 years old, I was living in Macon, Georgia, and I had been studying astronomy since I was 7 years old. And my dad was not a religious. My dad had, but he was a World War II surgeon, if you know, professional military plus surgeon. You put that personality together. Well, I surmised later that probably from what he went through in World War II as a medic in the Pacific Theater, it must have sort of turned him off on religion. So anyway, he was just had nothing to do with the religion when I was a kid. So I grew up, my interest was philosophy. I never thought about anything related to religion or and the idea of an afterlife, I thought that was I didn't realize anybody took that seriously. But anyway, there I was, 18 at the University of Virginia, and I decided to take a philosophy course my first semester because had been interested in philosophy in high school. So, wow, I just found my life's calling there. We've read Plato's Republic and just a few. What this book is about, really, it culminates in what we today call a near-death experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like there's a lot in there, but that's really the big high point of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to make a long story short, I just got interested in this ancient Greek phenomenon, but not realizing it was anything to do with the modern world. But in 1965, I had the honor and privilege and great life pleasure of hearing about the story of Dr. George Ritchie, who at that time was a professor of psychiatry there at the University of Virginia. And I heard that his that he had had such an experience when he was 20 years old at Camp Berkeley, Texas. And I heard Dr. Ritchie talk, and I knew, the thing that happened to him, it was beyond me, I'll tell you that. But what I was just blown away with was what a wonderful guy he was. To this day, he was the greatest guy I ever knew. And anyway, so that's how I came across this. I went on, I got a PhD in philosophy. I heard a lot of these from my colleagues and my students. And as I talked about it to the civic clubs around, heard it from the movers and shakers in this town, who come up afterward. I mean, that's how those civic clubs were back then. If you remember, it was all male province and the Lions and the um, all Ruritans, all those. And so when I go around to these little meetings, almost every time these guys would, Dr. Moody, I never told anybody this, but so that's how I got started. And then wrote this book when I was in medical school, and then went on, ultimately I did forensic psychiatry, which is, I'm still a little nervous from that one. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's like it doesn't sink in with you when you're doing it because it's relentless,
Mm.
right? But then the years pass and you think, oh my God, that was a pretty grim um, things that I was dealing with on a daily basis. So, I notice I I lock my doors at night, for example. But that's how this all got started was just, you know, by chance reading this in Plato's Republic.
Plato's Republic. All right. Also joining us in the live chat was Joey Splats, Jim Shook, Brenda Clifford, and Chris Home, all joining us in the live chat. If you have a question for Dr. Moody, put your question in the live chat as well. Well, Dr. Moody, now you're a mature individual. Have you found yourself more and more considering the appointed time in your life?
Well, I when I was 18, another one of the great books of Plato I read that same semester was called The Phaedo, which is about the process of dying and all. And in it, he said, philosophy is a rehearsal for dying. And I was at 18 years old. I thought, wow, I see what he's talking about. Now at age 77, I look back and I see, well, that seems very unusual that an 18-year-old would have had that response, but that was my response. And so I have, I've spent pretty much my life studying about this. So I yeah, I'm realizing it. Here I am in the home stretch, and I
Um,
got to say that. How old are you? Let me ask you that.
uh, I just tipped a little bit over 60.
60. Well, you have some really good years coming because this 70s thing is just it's great. It's what I've noticed is contrary to the reputation, I find that my cognitive process is sharper than it's ever been.
Mhm.
We moved down here to Sarasota in September. Okay, it's now July. And in that time, just because I put the books up on the shelf that I've read since I've just the sorting arrangement, I realized since I moved down here, I've read 51 books, and
Wow.
all of them are academic books. And I remember you probably too back in the 20s. Remember reading a book it was an
Not in the
effort and
20s.
all that. But well, I mean, when you're in your 20s,
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah.
if you think about it, reading a book in college or something, I mean, it's an effort.
Hmm.
But now here I am, 77, and it's just like zap, zap, zap. And what I find is that it's like there's so much in there already that it's sort of whatever you put in now just sort of fits in. So I'm very excited about this time of life, and I'm just I pray every morning and every evening. Like God guide me gently through to a painless, peaceful, pleasant death. God,
Oh,
on your schedule,
yeah.
right?
I definitely wouldn't be on his schedule. That's for daggone sure on that one there. Hey, I'll tell you what, Dr. Moody, we got a few questions coming in already. So here we
Right.
go. Um, Smoke C from the live chat says, Doctor, is the death experience and the path to the afterlife similar for everyone?
Well, you know, I've talked to thousands and thousands of people since who've had this experience since 1965 was the first I heard it from a living person, and thousands and thousands. And there is, in all those thousands, there's definitely patterns, and that is that there's about 15 or so common things, and one person may see, talk about three or four or five of them, 10 of them, or sometimes all of them. And the cases where they talk about all these different details are usually the ones that went on so long that you can't imagine they would have lived through it. Like I had a good friend I knew well for 20 years who was, and her doctor told me that she was dead, he said, for 40 minutes. And how does that happen? I don't know. But um, in these cases, what the sort of some of the common things that people say is that I heard the doctor say, "Oh my God, he's dead. We've lost him," or
Hmm.
words to that effect. But they say that from their point of view. I've heard again and again people say that some words to the effect that I've never been so alive as when I heard that doctor say I was dead.
Wow.
And People say it's like, you might imagine like it's a diminishment of your consciousness or like a going to sleep. But people say, no, it's the opposite. It's an expanding of your consciousness, more like a waking up. And far from feeling like, in the morning when you're coming out of a dream, you have that feeling of coming back to reality. That's what people say this is like, except that this is the dream that we're in now. And they say that it's like your consciousness floats up to sort of a higher kind of level of reality. And that that people say you can see your own physical body down below, and you can even understand what the doctors and nurses and others present are saying. Although they say it's not like you hear the voice; it's that you become aware of their thoughts and what's going on in their minds. And people say at some point they realize, oh, this is something to do with death. They say no matter how bright and articulate they are, how many languages they speak, everybody says, I just can't describe it to you. They say there are no earthly words that we can use to paint a picture of what this is like. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the way they can describe it, they say it's like, it's very similar accounts. They say you go through a passageway of some sort. They may relate it to a tunnel. And that you come out on the other side of this tunnel into this incredibly brilliant and warm and comforting light. And they say that everything is sort of permeated with love and light. And that in that state, that they often say that relatives or friends of theirs who have died are there. They say it's not like you see a physical body, but you recognize who they are, and the memories and so on. And people say that no matter how old they were when they died, an old person or a very young, they say the person you see there in that light is your relative, is kind of in the prime of life, that people don't really have an age, as you and I might interpret it. Mm-hmm. And after a while, they say everything else kind of disappears. And people say that time stands still. And suddenly they're surrounded by this panoramic hologram, which consists, they say, of every single thing they've ever done in their lives. And they see it not just from the perspective they had when they did this action, but they say you also see the effect of the actions you took have on other people through you are empathically embedded in the consciousness of those with whom you've interacted. So if you see yourself doing something mean to somebody, I know many of y'all might have done something mean to somebody in your life. I myself, I've never done anything like that myself. So
Come on, Doc.
I'm not worried about this. No, I'm just kidding. I'm hoping to recuse myself from my own life review. But
I think we all got some recusing to do.
But they say everything is done there, and this very often they say they relive this in the presence of a being of sheer light and compassion. Mm-hmm. Christians say Christ, Jews say God, or whatever. People say this, or being of light, and this being who knows everything about them and loves them. And through this life review, at some point people have to come back. And some say they have no idea how I got back. I was there and then I was here. Or others say they were told you got to go back. It's not your time. Yet others say they were given the choice. Mm-hmm. They chose to come back. So that's basically what people have told me over decades and decades now.
Mm-hmm. By the way, Doctor, we have on our website a poll that goes directly with this topic tonight, life after life. And the poll, I don't know if you've seen our website, but it's a poll for you. So here we go. It says, do you believe in life after life? And so let's see if we got some results in so far. Okay. All right. So in the poll, 78% say they absolutely believe in life after life. 7% says no, you're just hoping there's something there.
Uh,
Nobody said you vaporize into nothing. One person said, or I don't know what is it, 7%. So I don't know how many that is. 7% says you go to another dimension, and 7% says that for some it's going to be hell. So in all your conversations, for one thing,
uh,
it looks like by far the audience agrees with the existence or the thing of life after life. In all your conversations, has anybody told you about any sort of hellish experience?
yes, and I will say that there are so few of them that number one, it's easier to make an inference about a large number, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you have only a very small number of instances, it's very hard to, give any sort of analysis. But yeah, a dozen or so times over the years, people, um, and and what I find is that they are a lot more varied. Like the ones that are positive are more homogenous, where the ones that are negative tend to be kind of like hard to distinguish from a delirium, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just don't know how to make an inference. And the Gallup poll, when it studied this, had that same problem. They couldn't, they said they had such a small number of them were negative that they couldn't make much of an inference. But I also want to go and say that it's
Mm-hmm.
occurred to me, that, and I bet you might agree that if I was lying there in the bed and I had just had a hellish experience, I might not want to tell my doctor about it, right?
Definitely, because your doctor would probably put you on some kind of medication. All right. All right. Let's get to another question. Doreen says, Dr. Moody, has anyone ever said they see Jesus on the other side?
Yes, yes, yes. People say a religious figure, some say Christ, Jesus, and oh yes, yes, absolutely.
And now,
And by the way, and now this makes sense historically, but oddly enough, I've heard a number of people um, over the decades who were Muslims who had near death experiences in which they saw Jesus too. But that makes sense in that Jesus is a figure in the Islam just as he is in
yeah.
Christianity as
Yeah,
well.
I'd,
But
I'd be careful on that one. I would think if I had that experience and I saw Muhammad or somebody, I'd probably be in hell. But let me ask you something. You mentioned about seeing the life review, and I heard you in another program too as well, saying that the presence, and I'm going to use the word God, it could be light, I guess. Uh, Emanating from that is perfect love. There's no judgment coming out
yeah,
of that.
yeah.
But how
Uh,
long does that life review stay up there? I mean, does it like follow you around, or do you just have to see it once and you go about your business?
that is something really interesting to me too, because to me it's one of the most fascinating aspects of the near death experience because there's a startling conclusion that comes from it, absolutely, quite apart from any idea of the afterlife. But if you think about it for a minute, what the life review shows for a certainty is that at least for many of us, life is a two-phase process, right? First, we lead it through forward as the actor or protagonist. And then time stands still and was a turnaround, and we get to re-witness the same action from the point of view of the other characters. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's a rather startling thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that you do see, I mean, there are some real puzzles involved with this.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is that sometimes people can see in on it who are close to you. It's just, I've had a number of cases over, including one doctor who had
Mm-hmm.
no connection with the patient before was called
Mm-hmm.
to the ER to resuscitate.
They don't. They're not looking when I'm in the shower, are they?
Well, you know something, I figure Um, I am not. I spent my whole life thinking about, we're always being watched, by God in a very interesting and benign way. And I've come to accept that at the end, for at least some of us, it's like you get to see this backwards review of it, which must be utterly fascinating.
Mhm.
And so I'm grateful for the opportunity if
Okay.
when I get there.
Okay. All right. For people in the live chat watching the show, if you've had any near-death experiences, just write in a very simply yes or no or a one sentence thing what you saw. All right. We have another question for you from Amishcom. Says, Doctor, have you ever seen or have you ever met Howard Storm?
I did meet Howard Storm many years ago, and I know that he had a very dramatic, hellish experience, which turned at the end into a, which happens sometimes, once that can start very negative, can turn around and become very um, good in the end. And I remember Howard very well. Yeah, I did.
Okay. And then another question coming from Smoke says, Doctor, how many lives are we supposed to live, and do we choose what the purpose of each life will be, or do we have some kind of say in what kind of life? Now, the way this is written, it appears they're suggesting that there we have multiple lives. What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, and thank you so much for thinking that I might be able to answer it. But I immediately want to say that, I got to say, and again, thank you for the respect accorded me by the question. But I really, I have my own thoughts about it, which I'll share with you. But it's not anything that I would try to persuade anybody else on. But where I have come to on this came to me through my two little kids who are now grown, but I still my little kids who were adopted at birth. Carter is Mexican American by heritage, and Carolyn is a Native American Blackfeet Indian by heritage. My wonderful kids. And my wife and I don't talk about life after death at home, right? We
Mhm.
don't take these kids to religious ceremonies, but both of them just out of nowhere related these things about where they were before. And because we didn't grill them on it, we just we just were silent. But because of that, I think partly they have continued to sort of talk about this. So personally, I think my where I've come to it is, Elie Wiesel, who's a character some of us will know, but maybe the younger folks won't. But he was a wonderful writer, and he once said, "God made man because he loves stories." And that's what I kind of think, that I think what God is really interested in. And it certainly seems to be from this life review people have, that God is interested in your own personal life story,
Mhm.
and which is astonishing to me. But I mean, I can see that how it's unfolded in my own life, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm. You mentioned
And
earlier, uh, Dr. Moody. You mentioned that if you've been mean to people, that you actually get to see you get to see the repercussions of that action.
that's right.
But
That's right.
and then you said you want to recuse yourself. So I'm just wondering, is there anything in this life before you get over and that scene gets impregnated in your life story on the other side? Is there any way
Mhm.
to delete that story, offsetting by apologizing to God or the person or doing a good act? Can you delete that scene, or is it permanent no matter what you do?
I knew a really great young man who it just that was why he chose to come back, to sort of correct some of the mean things he had done
Mhm.
to friends and so on. So yeah, there is that attitude with some, and then other people come back saying that, I mean, it just transforms their lives. Whatever they were chasing before, they say, hard as it is, that we try to try to pursue learning to love others, which is, but even this wonderful George Ritchie, I mean, like I said, the greatest guy I ever knew. He one time he told me, he said, Raymond, this experience makes your humanity even more of a burden in a way.
Mm.
And what he meant by that, George was very kind-hearted. He would not use words like I'm going to use, right? But my rendition of that is, let's face it, it's very hard to get through the average day without wanting to choke at least one person. Isn't that right? Right?
Oh, man.
You admit it
Wow.
too.
Wow, you've
Yeah.
been reading my mail, man. Okay, so
and 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 that doesn't go away. See,
mhm.
you just that you you're still that person, and you're still, but that it commits people to a totally different life. I've seen it, with many people I knew for a long period of time, that they really do put prayer and meditation, and they really try to get it better.
Okay, well let me throw this one out too. That's a great point you made there. Anybody in live chat, I'm going to test your theory. Today or this week, did anybody in live chat just say yes or no? Did you want to choke somebody? Now, to our earlier question to the live chat, I asked if anybody had been to the other side, and we have a few yeses in there. And then it looks like somebody said they saw the Grim Reaper. But then we have this question, or this answer to that question. Half Q says, I died twice. I was hunted by human dogs. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't. That is not a familiar kind of story to me, but that really sounds just utterly fascinating. I mean, but I'm sorry I can't comment with not knowing the context and all. But that sounds pretty drastic.
I give the live chatters, the viewers in the live chat, I gave them a easier question. I said, or smack them, rather than say, did they have any feelings of choking somebody? I made it simpler and easier. Said, do you have any desire to smack somebody today or
Oh
this
yeah,
week?
yeah,
Now we have a
yeah.
no, and we have an yeah, we have a yes, we have a slap count. We have lots of laugh choke somebody. Um, and here's a person says they beat themselves up. So how about that? Maybe
Yeah.
some people want to choke themselves.
That's right. And I guess I mea culpa on that one. I've been through self-destructive periods in my own life too. So I mean, that seems to be built into us. But what I'm getting at is that people say that even after you have this grand experience, it's losing your fear of death and realizing the importance of love. It's really very difficult to put that into practice in everyday reality.
Well,
And
we put that into some practice last week. We had a guest on the
uh,
program that many would take issue with their lifestyle, and
mhm.
we didn't make any judgments on this program according to this person and their lifestyle choice. In fact, we decided we would just love them on the air and respect them. Although still, it's a fine line, Dr. Moody, when you respect someone and treat them with care and tenderness and love, and not move your belief system that you believe that your intrinsic that your foundational principles. I guess I could say, I didn't compromise those by doing so. And it's a kind of a fine line to do that, and it maybe takes some practice for us, all of us, to take some practice to not be judgmental, but at the same time holding your foundational principles. Because for me, I'm sure you believe that your foundational principles and ethics are worthy, and that it makes for a better life. I'm sure by now you've got armor that's got dents all through it, and it's made you who you are. And what you believe now, you must believe that you have wisdom to share. And that's why you're on the program tonight. You do obviously have wisdom to share.
Well, I have not reached that point of realizing that I have wisdom yet, but I sure do know that I just see. I think to me, it's all your relationship with God. I turn it over. I mean, I am completely confident that, I mean, since I mean, I pray in the morning, I pray in the evening, I do it several times during the day. I mean, it's just a constant conversation. And I am completely confident that God is going to uh, correct me, or like if with God would let me know in one way or another if I get off course. And I just, from my relationship with God, I think that to me, God is a lot more forgiving and allows a lot more latitude than um, than a lot of the human doctrine does on it. See, is the way I look at it.
Hmm.
And I'm just trusting to God to whack me down if I go too far wrong. But
Okay.
so far, I think He is treating me with a good sense of humor.
Well, that's good. Now, Gary Kidwell says, Dr. Moody, I beat myself up. Can I be forgiven? But let me expand on that thought. And because this question always comes up, can somebody who commits suicide be forgiven? Or are they committing murder?
Uh, well, see, my take on this comes from being a psychiatrist who dealt a lot with violence, specifically a lot of psychotic killers and mass murderers and occasional serial killers
You talk,
in a
what?
maximum security unit.
Wow.
So when you say murderer or suicide, from a long experience, this is what I think.
Okay.
Number one, I think you might agree if you survey all the adults that you know very deeply, so that you know them inside and out, you probably would agree with me that a number of them are committing suicide. I mean, whether drinking themselves to death or smoking themselves to death or playing with their cell phone, zooming down the highway, or or lying around on the sofa, or like me, consuming cholesterol. So the idea that God is going to zap somebody who takes 30 minutes by pills, whereas somebody who takes 30 years by cigarettes gets a pass. See,
Oh, good. Wow.
I,
Nice. Very nice.
yeah. Well, what I mean is that God, you know, it's God looks at this in a bigger picture than we do. I
Hmm.
mean, what self destruction, and so I just think that what I hear from people who have hundreds, I guess, of people, certainly dozens and dozens and dozens of people who've had their near death experience as a result of suicide attempts say they would never again attempt it.
Hmm.
Not because they felt like they were going to go to some terrible hell if it had gone through to completion, but rather from reflection on what this would have done to their loved ones left behind, primarily, and that they would have seen that in their life review and so on. And
Hmm.
so people say, yeah, I never tried again after that.
So,
And
okay, go ahead.
and also a number of people say this, use the same metaphor, almost say, it's like it or simile, I guess, like comparing it to go walking out of the movie before the movie's over, that you have a regret and afterward that you wonder, you left things hanging and you
Hmm.
wonder how it would have worked out.
Hmm.
Yeah. So don't do
Okay. Well,
it.
I guess that'd been good advice to Brian to Jeffrey Epstein. He didn't take that advice. Um,
uh,
so, and a lot of people agree with that interesting point you made about is there a difference between taking a pill or killing yourselves 30 years of bad habits? Let me. So you say as a psychiatrist, you talk to killers.
well, yeah. Um, back in you or maybe a little young to remember, but in 1966, we had a couple of really fascinating homicides in the United States. The Whitman killings of 17 persons from the Texas Tower and the, the Richard Speck killings. So that summer, it was all over the New York Times for weeks. And so I was just really interested. I was a graduate student in philosophy at the time, but then I just kept up an interest in homicide. So then, when I went to medical school, I started following then the forensic pathologist would go out to the crime scenes. I guess they didn't have the criminalists that they do now. It was just the doctor would go to real unusual. So I got to do a lot of that. I was just in my two of my closest relatives in law enforcement from the time I was a kid. So um, I just got interested in it, and I worked in a maximum security unit for the criminally insane with people who had done these.
I don't know why.
Uh,
I, I don't know why that makes me laugh. Criminally insane. I always think about the government. I don't know, but all right. So you talk to these killers. Is there is it that their mind snaps? You're a psychiatrist. I mean, what is it? Their youth upbringing? They just hate God. I mean, what causes people to do that?
well, each one was a puzzle, right? But some of the kinds of things that go on in cases we had would be delusions, right? A delusion is a fixed false belief that somebody has that they can't be persuaded out of by rational means. And a lot of these people had delusions or heard voices, which, the voices telling them to kill people and so on. And so, and these were, I mean, just very, very bizarre killings, right? Which is why the government has decided more or less that they don't want these people in prison, right? They need a kind of special handling area for, um,
For
and
psycho
so
killers?
that's well, and that's really what we did. We had about 120 patients at any one time in the male unit, and it was just an absolutely fascinating experience. We all agreed we felt grateful to God in a way to it's like giving us the experience of working almost in another dimension,
Hmm.
which it was. I
Well,
mean,
now that is an interesting question because that leads me into my next question anyway, and that is, do you believe that we're in a holographic universe? Is everything around us real, Doctor?
well, I've definitely wondered about that since I was a kid, and I suspect you probably did too, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
remember very well just waking up to consciousness when I was looking through a telescope one night and thinking, "Oh my God, how can this be that here I am, me, in the midst of all this vast universe?" And so, and I'm sure you had this intuition too. It seemed to me that while I can be sure I'm conscious, there's no doubt about that. But the next step to go from recurrent patterns in my consciousness to the existence of an external physical world, I've never been able to go that far, and I'm not sure that you have either, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
really because once you get to think about, I mean, I give up, right?
Hmm.
Because any set of patterns you see, you can explain it as a projection of a that perhaps these are movies that we're in. That's what a lot of old people tell me. I worked for a year as a geriatric psychiatrist, working with very distinguished old people who were there mostly for loneliness or situational
Hmm.
stress or whatever.
Hmm.
But just very brilliant and reflective people. And constantly during that year, I heard, Raymond, the older I get, the more it seems to me when I look back at my life that it's been a movie or a script or a play. Or that's just a very common perception of reflective old people.
Hmm.
And so um, I and that I think is about as good of a definition of personal identity as I can come up with.
Hmm.
That what is your identity as a person except your life story, right?
Have you been in hospice areas before?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. When I was in medical school, even, I mean, I was already known for studying this. So, and I was older than the other students because I'd
Hmm.
been through a PhD in philosophy first. So
Hmm.
I was the one usually that they would, to my great good fortune, that the attendings would usually,
Hmm.
I had a lot of terminally ill patients. Yeah.
Did any of those patients tell you they saw relatives in their room?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. And I remember one lady, I guess in her early 80s, and I walked in the room. She was kind of talking to her relatives who had passed, and I just sat down beside the bed. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation.
Right, that'd been rude.
Yeah, and she said, no, Dr. Manny. And she looked at me and she smiled. She said, oh, no, Dr. Manny, I know what you're thinking. You think this old woman here is hallucinating. And I said, no, no, ma'am, no, ma'am, no, ma'am. I
Mhm.
said, I know about this. And we had a, so,
Now,
you know,
in,
we see this all the time.
in the
Absolutely.
medical community, you must be aware that a large percentage of them say that this idea of this seeing this tunnel, this light, is merely chemical reactions of your brain, and then
Yeah.
it's bringing fragments of memories here and there, and so it's all chemically induced, just bodily produced, and there's nothing there. Do you agree with that?
Well, I would wonder about the percentage. Obviously, the physicians who are friends of mine and all are very receptive to this, right? So, I mean, I think I've been invited to all sorts of medical societies where, there's a lot of people are very receptive to this. But you're right, there is a subculture also that's very hostile to it.
Hmm.
And it's nothing new, Daniel. I mean, this same debate goes back to Plato versus Democritus like 2,300 years ago. Plato said, yeah, this indicates an afterlife. Democritus, who had figured out that that tabletop you're on there is made up of tiny little bits that are too small to see. He said, no, these things, it's just, he said, there's no such thing as a moment of death. He said, what these things are is the residual biological activity in the body even after the person seems dead. And this now we call it oxygen deprivation to
Mm.
the brain.
Mm.
Well, what I don't want to know is why it is that identically that same experience with all of the elements, including getting out of your body or seeing a light, seeing the relatives of the dead come in, going part way out of your body toward this light, even empathically co-living the dying life review of a person occurs not to people who are on the verge of death, but to bystanders at the death of somebody else. That somebody standing there at the bedside as grandma dies
Hmm.
may say that, yeah, as grandma died, I lifted out of my body with her and I went up toward this light and I
Hmm.
saw, Aunt Martha there.
Hmm.
So, I mean, and also I got to think that there's a certain amount of fear, Daniel, on this whole thing because, some people are terrified that they might have to say, I don't know. Well, saying I don't know just trips easily off my tongue, really, because
Hmm.
I realized when I was 7 years old and looked through a telescope that I was never going to know much of anything but that the fun of life is gathering up what little you can, right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so
So, Dr. Moody, over the thousands of near-death experiences you've examined, have you? Does that actually give you more hope for when you meet your maker that there's something over there rather than you disappear? Has it buoyed your expectation of something good that's going to happen, or were you always that way?
Well, it was a long process for me. I knew this wasn't oxygen deprivation to the brain, but I just didn't know what it was. Um, and it was a long process for me. Um, but where I've come to is in the last few years is that I just give up. I mean, I can't think of what else it might be.
Mhm.
One thing is I have maybe, a dozen medical doctor friends all told who've had near death experiences, right? Who assure me that, this was reality. Now I asked myself, would I am an inveterate walker. Okay.
Okay.
I'm decades. I
Mhm.
have to walk every day. Not a virtue, not hoping I'm going to live longer. I got to do it. It's an addiction. All right.
Okay. Okay.
Now, if heaven forbid something were to happen to my foot, I say, would I go with my injured foot to see Dr. Anthony Chicoria, an orthopedic surgeon who's a professor of was a professor of orthopedic surgery at NYU and is also a PhD in physiology, and who in 1996 was struck in the neck by lightning and had a cardiac arrest and had a near death experience. Now, Tony tells me, yeah, absolutely. This was not just real, this is more real than real as we understand it. And from a dozen of my medical friends whose medical judgment I trust, it's like it gets to you after a while. I give up. I just give up. I think there is. But I wouldn't try to persuade anybody else of that. People have got to make up their own minds.
Mm-hmm. Um, a viewer says, I lived inside of my coma. Is that normal?
Well, number one, Daniel, I'll tell you the truth. I did find out as a psychiatrist what normal is. So are you ready to hear it? Normal is somebody you don't know very well, isn't it?
Okay. Okay.
That's
Okay.
right. Gotcha. So normal, I don't know. And so what was the what was the specific thing that then the question about
That he's this person said they lived inside their coma.
yes, yes, yes. When when I was in medical school, we had a lady, as this went on for months, the lady who was comatose, right? And every day we'd go in and see her in the rounds. And most of the days when we went in there was the Bible group in there reading the Bible to her.
Nice.
And so we would go through and all. And so then, in our little rounds after we'd talk about it, it's like, isn't it nice that those people come to read the Bible to us every day? And but so we said, our attitude was, that's really nice of them to do that. But, as we know from our superior medical point of view, she can't respond to that. She's comatose. So, months go by. Then we go in one morning and she's sitting up in bed. She's back from the coma. And so one of the first things she said, I think I would have gone crazy if those people hadn't come in to read the Bible to me every day. So
Mm,
I'm just my own personal practice with comatose patients has always been to be very ginger about it.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I assume that they are conscious
Uh, when
because
when um, when somebody has a near death experience, you mentioned that they see others, and I've heard that more than once. People say that the age of the people seems to be around 30,
around 30, that's right.
and
The prime of life.
which is good news for all of us.
That's right.
Because I got a lot of living left to do, and I got to live again when I'm up there. But and then you said that they see the sort of the image of others. Do they see angels, beings, animals, flowers, anything like that?
I can't remember anybody seeing angels in the sense of wings and such. But definitely people who say that you see beings who are kind of enlightened, that they're shining, you know, light.
Mhm.
So, if you want, but in terms of wings and such, no, I can't remember anything specifically
No,
like that. But
nobody
and
flying around, nothing like that. And then to the animal or flowers type of thing. Anything like
I very occasionally animals, but flowers, yes. A very wonderful student of mine who was worked for eminent politician, actually was just one of the sweetest people I knew, and she had a near death experience when she was 11, and she I met her when she was in her 50s, but
Mhm.
she painted this picture of me from what she saw at her and during her near death experience, and these unearthly beautiful flowers.
Oh,
Okay, now that was in about 1989 or so that she gave me that painting. Flash forward to about 1992, and the Japanese TV network had come to talk about near death experiences because the very famous Japanese news journalist over there was really fascinated by the subject of near death experiences, and there was
mhm.
interest. So he came over, and I had this painting. And I'm not making this story up, by the way. I had this painting on the wall
Mhm.
at just right before he went out on my porch. So the Japanese guy and I were walking around, and so he said he had studied, he interviewed a lot of Japanese people. And he said, but Dr. Moody, he said, one thing I found in the Japanese reports is that a lot of them people see flowers. And he said, but I don't see that in the American reports. And right at that moment, I swear to God, we walked right to that point where the picture on the wall was. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, this.
All
And
right.
so, yeah. And so, and I've heard flowers too. Yeah, this is nice. And apparently that's a, an element that the Japanese are fond of as well.
Mhm. Did you say in the first hour that philosophy is preparation for dying?
Yeah, a rehearsal for dying. That's right.
Rehearsal. That's what I want. Philosophy is
Yeah,
rehearsal. And you're
yeah,
absolutely right. Going even back to the Book of the Dead, the Egyptians. I mean, the fascination with death and the afterlife goes back in human history as long as there's any recorded history. And now, of course,
it
today
does.
science is trying to tell us to forget all that, that everyone was just crazy. All the billions of people that believe that were just crazy. But science is going to somehow tell you the truth that you're just going to be dead and you're just going to, plant a tree on your body because that's all you're going to be able to help anybody after life. But I don't think science can give us the answers like they think they can.
Well, there's different kinds of scientists, and I know some that are really great and modest at their, awareness of what they're able to do. But I'm a person who loves science and also realizes that there's a great difference between science and scientism. I
Hmm.
love science. I've
Hmm.
been am an avid astronomy guy since I was 7 years old. But what scientism is a sort of social belief in America now. It's very prevalent that science is the only rational means of answering a question. And I used to teach epistemology, which is theory of knowledge in philosophy. And I'd say the first couple of days, I'd say to the kids, what do you think knowledge is? Well, just believe me and trust me. And American kids and that sort of, oh, science is knowledge. Right? So, well, what do you mean by that? I'd finally get them to say, scientific method is the only rational means of establishing knowledge. So I'd write that up on the board. Is that what you think? Yeah. So then I'd draw a rectangle around it and I'd point to it and I'd say, well, how do you know that? Now, if they if they say, well, scientific method is the only rational means of establishing knowledge, and I know that by scientific method, that's called reasoning in a circle, right? It just assumes what you set out to prove. On the other hand, if you say scientific method is the only rational means of establishing knowledge, and I know that by history or philosophy or literary theory or the law, see, that's a self contradiction
Mm-hmm.
because you appeal to some other. So, this whole attitude that you're describing there of people who think science is going to solve everything, well, that's a kind of delusion.
Mm-hmm.
And people are very fearful who live in that kind of restricted worldview
Mm-hmm. Well,
because,
I give you an example of science. Uh, it used to be they said that hydrogen uh, could be kept in stainless steel drums, and that's what science says. And you actually mentioned about, I think you said something about a wood table, but then they found that the molecules are smaller than the metal itself and will actually evaporate through there. But science would tell you in the beginning that this is a sealed unit and nothing can. This is absolutely a solid drum. Nothing can go through it. Well, that's not true. But in the beginning, science will tell you that it can until it can't. So that's why I always question science, because they give you a story and everybody tells you the same story, but later they find out more facts and they change the story and act like they never said what they said at the beginning. And then you're supposed to believe in what they're saying today. So I got a little skepticism there. I think I'm getting more or hearing more scientism than I'm hearing scientific fact.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think the guys who really just enjoy doing it, just doing it for its own sake, it's that's how it is. It's process, right? Something that we think strongly now, we may have to, we may see something different in a few years. So I think there's that kind of flexibility for the good ones. I mean, there's ideologues in any subject, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, but
Yeah.
I think the people who are just really driven by curiosity, as you seem to be quite a bit, and I know I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different thing.
Okay, we have this question from Put Yahweh First. So, Doctor, people who are in a vegetative state, are
Mhm.
their spirit soul or consciousness away from their body?
Sometimes people who've been in that state tell me so. I remember a young man in Virginia back in the 70s telling me that, and that throughout his period of being comatose after a horrible motorcycle accident, which I just grates on my nerves to think about. But he said that during this long period of time he was comatose, that he said he kept coming in and out of his body. He said, yeah, it was like for a lot of the time he was out of his body. And I mean, that's just one story, but I remember him because I remember the beautiful description, but I hear it's something I hear a lot.
Mhm. It's supposedly a scientific fact that when you die, your body weighs 23 grams less. Is that true?
I I know about that study, but I don't put any credence into it at all.
Mhm.
And I would think in the first place that the aspect of us, if assuming there's an aspect of us that survives after death, I don't think is of a material nature, is the way I think about it.
Dr. Moody, when you go to the great beyond, what question has been burning in your mind through these years? What's the first question that you want to ask whoever it is over there that's managing that thing? What question do you want to ask first?
I decided a long time ago, Daniel, thinking about this, and from all the thousands of people I talk to, I don't think that I am capable of formulating a question that would be appropriate under that circumstance. Because no matter how, and I suspect you've talked to some of these folks too, I mean, it's just they say that this is just too much to put into words, that there's no way they can give us an adequate description of it
I heard
based on the language we understand.
so I heard somebody said, Never ask God why me, because
Mm.
you know what God will say.
Why not you, I
Yeah,
guess.
he'll say, do you want a list?
Yeah,
When
that's
somebody says,
right.
God, why me? Why me? And God say, do you want a list? I mean, I think, you know what I'm saying? I'm thinking we all have kind of a list going there. So that's a question I'm not asking because,
Yeah,
and that's the thing about the life review is that I am sure from what you're describing, and others have said similar things, that you're going to see things that you forgot about, or maybe that your mind has really
that's
been
right.
protecting you. Your mind let you forget it because it's too
That's
horrible.
right.
What you did was so horrible that you don't want to remember and you couldn't remember and go on with life. But then all of a sudden you go, oh, I can't believe I'm bringing that up here. This is heaven, or the afterlife. I mean, that one. I mean, and I've asked
Yeah,
other guests too, how many people are going to see what you did? But I do believe that somehow
yeah.
our minds give us a little self protection and allows us to forget some of the things that we may be embarrassed about or shouldn't have never done.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope that we can have a sort of editing session at some point. I mean,
An editor, I like
you
that.
know, like some of the things clipped out. That would be a nice thought. But then you know what would happen? And I'll tell you this is that as soon as you clipped it out, you'd say, oh, darn it, I should have left that in, because then, it's like,
Mm.
who knows? I mean, you think of all the things that when you were a teenager happened to you, you think, oh my God, this is just the end of the world. Now, flash forward, you laugh at those same
Mm.
things, right?
Mm. Uh, so you have written several books, and I have one of them in our background. If somebody were to read these books, Dr. Moody, what would they come away with? Are they encouraging books? Are they books designed to make you think? Or just information? Do what you will. What are you trying to do with your books? What would you like to see happen when somebody picks one up?
Great. Well, thanks for that question, Daniel. That's just a terrific question. And all my life, I have just been driven by curiosity. And so I was naturally fascinated by these near death experiences. And I didn't really have in mind writing about them, except that this is my book, Life After Life, except I talked to a medical society about it, the subject, and a reporter was there. And based on her story and then a publisher called me, was how it happened. And, but I love to write. And I got to say, I just think that I am so grateful to have my contact I do with my readers. I mean, it's something I really thank you, God, all the time about. I mean, it's just a wonderful opportunity, because I think that knowledge and information is, here I am, 77. I've spent my life seeking knowledge. And I got to say, it's a good thing to seek.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
really,
Mm-hmm.
it's really very satisfying life. And I just love to impart knowledge. I think that, that my dad, I got that from my dad, who was a surgeon, but his idea was that if you are educated, then you have an absolute obligation, he thought, to be in public education. He would always do lectures on surgical things with groups and such. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I got that from him. And I think knowledge is a wonderful thing. This new book that I've done, everybody knows, I guess, about Life After Life, but the one that just came out a few months ago is I've been working on a long time. It's called God is Bigger Than the Bible. And what it is, it sort of came about from the pandemic because I've been working on it a long time. And the general idea is that I just met a lot of people over the years who really are looking for God, but who can't get there through religion or through the Bible, and who are intimidated. I've known people that's like just like so intimidated by the Bible, for example, that they stay away from God. And so what this book is all about is about what I've learned about God from my own personal experience of the presence of God. And also from talking with thousands of people who've been with God in the course of their near death experiences. So these are personal reflections about God. And it's like my basic message is you don't need to be solemn or formal or scared. That talking to God is like a relationship. It's like if you get too much into wondering about, well, does he exist? Oh, yes, he exists because of this. The design, the little amoebas that's all so beautifully designed. I mean, that's poppycock. It's like God. I was a professor of logic for a while, and it'd take us about an hour, but I could go through and I could explain to you what it means to say that something exists. There's even a symbol for it and a way of expressing that concept of existence in the language of logic. But when it comes to God, I give up. God is greater than existence itself. No, it's what I say is if somebody asks me, Raymond, do you believe that God exists? I say, well, absolutely not, because number one, any belief that I, limited Raymond Moody, is going to be able to formulate about God would be bound to be off base. Plus, that sentence, do you believe that God exists? The emphasis of that sentence is on the word exist. I say that God is great. When somebody asks if God exists, they're trying to put this human concept, existence, and make it a circle around God. And that's just funny if you think about it. It's so,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, so I say, what I say is, I have a relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it comes across to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what God is bigger than the Bible is all about. It's like my relationship with God and the things I've learned about God through my relationship with God and through what people tell me when they've had their near death experiences.
Mm-hmm. Well, you'd be happy to know that what you said, I triggered a corroborating truth that I found in the Bible where Moses went up to the fiery bush
Mm-hmm.
and asked God, who shall I say sent me? And he said, I am that I am, which is
Yeah,
exactly what you said in another way by saying the word exist as if that's, and I agree with you in that circle. But
that's
when you
right.
say I am that I am, that's so far, that's not, there's no circle that can hold that. It's so far out there. And another thing you
Yeah,
said about God is bigger than the Bible itself says that God is bigger than the Bible because it said
that's right.
if the works of
That's
Jesus were written down, this world could not contain the works that he did, which means, of course, Jesus says that I am God, I and the Father are one, which means he was in the very beginning of the creation. And we all know that, as you said, and I agree that God lives some way through us and or wants to see our story, but not, I mean, there's a connection there that somehow what you're doing, God may be experiencing in some way. And so
that's right.
it's very, very, very interesting. And by the way, in our live chat, Smoke C says, Doctor, we want you to know how much we appreciate your wisdom and gentle spirit.
Mm. Thank you so much. That is so sweet of you to say. Thank you.
Well,
I got about what you were saying, Daniel.
yeah.
This Christian monk from the 14th century, Meister Eckhart said, "The eyes with which I see God are the same eyes with which God sees me." That's a pretty good one, I think.
Wow. And you've been giving us some real nuggets here tonight. We got
Yeah.
philosophy as rehearsal for the afterlife, and then the one about the taking the pill to commit suicide or slowly killing yourself, the
Right.
conundrum there. And then there's another one in there. And this is even yet another one. Remember in the first hour, I said you're going to be bringing wisdom, and you said, well, I ain't got no wisdom, but yet, doctor, you have. But your
Mm.
humility is also showing in that, and that's another great trait. And I appreciate you doing that. So, are you done with writing books, or are you writing another one?
Well, I am right. Yeah, I'm constantly writing. I just love doing it. And my prayer every morning and evening is that, God guide me in my work, lead and guide me in my work. And I pray that, what I do, um, that I do helps people, because, it may sound virtuous when you're in 20s to say, well, the happiest life is to help others. And then it sounds like an ideal at first, and then it becomes kind of an aspiration. But I guarantee you, when you get 77, it's just a fact of experience because, the reality is you're happiest when you're helping other people. That's just the
Okay.
facts
Okay.
of life.
So, reflecting on your life, we got some people watching the show that's 30, 40 maybe, and they're constantly worried about this, they're worried about that. And they're all, maybe even complaining about the gas price, complaining about the vaccine, complaining about the schools, complaining about the government. So, in your mature state, what advice would you give people that are currently in a state where, I mean, we probably all have been there in the worry state, and one worry kind of after another, as if it's a part of their being. What would you tell them?
Well, I've been there many years, many decades of worry, worry, worry. I know exactly what you're talking about. And one encouraging word is that it gets better just with time. It does. It does. And also in terms of an active stance, I guess it's a paradox to recommend the active stance of surrender, but that's what I've come to see from an old friend of mine said, the most powerful prayer is surrender. So I say, what I'd say is, and I'm not religious, by
Right.
it's
See that?
I'm not into religion. It's like my wife and I lived in Alabama for quite a while, and we never took our kids to church because we
Mm-hmm.
used to say, well, we're afraid of snakes, right? But that's just a little joke.
Mm-hmm.
Because right there in Indiana, y'all had the snake handlers
Mm-hmm. You're right. Yeah,
around
we got some.
Evansville. I know that because I got one of our best friends lives in Evansville, so I know. So, um, but it's just it's a relationship with God is what it's all about. I mean, worry is, yes, I've got them too. What you can eventually do, and maybe you can do this faster in your lives than I'm able to do it in mine
All right.
because you're younger folks that I'm talking to here. um, just pray and let it, surrender, let it, turn it over to God, and try to avoid the coming up with the solution and sending it up as a prayer request is my advice because that gets you in big trouble more often
Okay.
than not.
Okay. Explain that again. Don't pray. What now?
Yeah, in other words, what I used to do is I'd be in trouble. So I'd pray. I'd come up with the outcome that I wanted to have,
Okay.
and I would pray to God to send that love. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And very often I'd get it, but then I would immediately realize, oh no, shouldn't have asked for that. So what I finally learned to do is that you just say at the very beginning, open it up. You solve this. You know, I just let this go to God, right? It's the way it works out best in the long run in life, in my opinion. And I also understand about the worry and the drivenness. Goldie Hawn, I figure, must be a genius.
Oh,
I heard something she said years ago, I read about. She said she had 7 years of psychoanalysis. And she said, what my psychoanalysis did to me was that it changed me from a driven person to a driving person. And that's exactly what I've experienced in my life. And I bet you have too in your life to a degree, that right? It's like, and what was, all right, now get this. Before I was 31 years old, I had two doctoral degrees, a PhD in philosophy, plus 3 years of teaching philosophy in a university. Then I went to medical school and had my PhD and my MD before 31. And at that point, Daniel, you are old enough to be able to attest to all our listeners. And the, what I am saying is that there was something terribly wrong with somebody who would have two doctoral degrees
hmm,
by the age of 31. Isn't that true?
yeah.
Yeah. And that was me,
Wow.
my whole life with my nose in the book. So, um, so I am no stranger to worry and drivenness, but that's what happened to me. Just like Goldie Hawn said, I just got to where now it doesn't feel like it's being shoved from behind anymore. It doesn't. The energy is coming from out front. It's what I want to do. I'm motivated to get my work done, rather than having this guilt trip or whatever it was pushing me from behind. You got to do, you got to accomplish, you got to accomplish. It's just like what you want to do, you know.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, we're right at the end of the broadcast, and I think a scripture that would kind of go with what we're talking about, where Paul said, I know how to be abased, I know how to abound everywhere in all things. I'm instructed both to be full and to be hungry, to both abound and suffer need, but I can do all things through Christ. So, I mean,
Yeah,
once we talk about worry, um, maybe those things that we're worried about are things that are going to make us better people. And certainly, we only have one shot at this thing. We want to get it right. So if we got to go through a couple things to take the sharp edges off there, they'll take one of those clips out. That's like editing what we're going to see on the next side. Well, Dr. Raymond Moody, I appreciate you coming on the Edge broadcast. Any final thoughts?
well, just I want to appreciate you so much for hosting this, and appreciate all the folks tuned in tonight. So just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
And I didn't even have time to send out my Amway products for, but I'm just joking about that. Just
Right.
joking about that.
All right. Speaking of editing, we'll edit the first start of this program here because it'll seem like you just logged right on and everything went great. And that's the good thing about editing. So I'm
Great.
going to ask the good Lord if He could edit some things out. So Dr. Moody, can we have you on the show again sometime?
Please, please. This was just more than just fun, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
did you have fun too with it?
Absolutely. People in the
Me
live chat,
too.
you have fun tonight? Hang on for a second. We're going to find out. I just asked people in the live chat, did they have fun tonight? We're going to find out. Mishcom said, this was an amazing show, Doctor. Thank you. Smoke C says, thank you, Daniel and Jade and that doctor. Let's see. Tony Louisiana said, great show. Um, our moderator, Jay says, great fun. We got a 10 by 10. Chris Holmes says, yes, very fun. How about this? Southern Boy says, Raymond is the man. Um,
All right.
and then we have another constant companion says, yes, I love the show. So it looks like a lot of people had fun watching the show
All
tonight.
right. Well, just thank y'all so much. This is just so much fun for me. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Doctor, we'll have you back on the program.
Great.
All right. Bye bye.